November 1944. Warsaw was no longer a city, it was a graveyard of bricks. The air carried the bitter scent of smoke, dust and gunpowder. Whole streets were flattened, churches and schools were reduced to rubble. Once called the Paris of the East, Warsaw was now a wasteland of collapsed roofs and hollowed buildings, echoing with silence. In that silence, one man moved like a shadow. His name was Władysław Szpilman, a pianist once celebrated across Poland. Now he was gaunt, skeletal, wrapped in rags. His fingers, once gliding over ivory keys, trembled as he pried open empty cupboards in search of food. He hadn't eaten in days. He hadn't spoken to anyone in weeks. For months, Szpilman had lived hidden among the ruins. His Polish friends who'd sheltered him were gone, evacuated or killed after the failed Warsaw uprising. Winter crept closer, bringing death to anyone left without shelter. He was searching the remains of a German headquarters when he heard boots behind him. A voice cut through the silence. "What are you doing here?" Szpilman froze. Turning, he saw a tall man in a grey officer's coat, a German, armed and composed. The pianist's heart sank. This was it. Arrest, interrogation, execution. But the officer didn't raise his weapon. Instead, he asked quietly, "You're a pianist, aren't you?" Szpilman nodded, barely able to speak. "Prove it," the officer said. In the corner stood a grand piano, coated in ash and dust. Szpilman's weak hands hovered over the keys. He pressed one. It still worked. Then, with trembling fingers, he began to play Chopin's Nocturne in C minor. The melody floated through the frozen air, soft but unbroken, filling the ruins with a sound that hadn't been heard in Warsaw for months. Beauty. When he finished, the officer simply stood there. Then he spoke. "You must stay alive." That single decision would save Szpilman's life, but condemn the man who made it to die forgotten in a Soviet cell. Władysław Szpilman was born on December 5, 1911 in Sosnowiec, Poland, the son of a middle-class Jewish family. From the age of 6, the piano was his companion. He studied tirelessly, first in Warsaw's Chopin Academy, then in Berlin's Academy of Arts, where he learned under world-renowned masters. Berlin in the early 1930s was alive with culture, but by 1933, everything changed. Hitler came to power and Jewish musicians were expelled from every conservatory. Szpilman returned home before it was too late. By 1935, he had become one of Poland's most respected pianists, recording, composing and performing live on Polish radio. His specialty was Chopin, the poet of Polish resistance. On September 23, 1939, he sat at the radio studio playing Chopin's Nocturne in C minor. Outside, German bombs began to fall. The broadcast cut off mid-performance as the studio shook. That was the last live music heard on Polish radio for 6 years. When the Germans sealed the Warsaw Ghetto in November 1940, Szpilman and his family were forced inside, 400,000 people trapped behind walls, fighting starvation and disease. Szpilman played piano in ghetto cafes, trying to earn enough to feed his parents and siblings. In 1942, the deportations began. Day after day, trains left for Treblinka, carrying thousands to their deaths. When Szpilman's family was ordered to board, a Jewish policeman recognized him. "Run," he whispered, and pulled him out of the line. Szpilman watched helplessly as his mother, father, brother, and 2 sisters disappeared into the crowd. They never returned. From that moment, he lived like a fugitive. He hid in attics, cellars, empty apartments, surviving on whatever he could find. Friends from the Polish resistance risked everything to shelter him, though discovery meant execution for their entire families. When the Warsaw Uprising erupted in August 1944, it was meant to free the city. Instead, it brought destruction. German artillery leveled entire districts. By October, the resistance had been crushed. The surviving civilians were evacuated, leaving Warsaw an empty shell. And in that shell, alone, Władysław Szpilman remained, starving, weak, but alive. The man who found him, Captain Wilm Hosenfeld, had once been a schoolteacher. Born in 1895 in central Germany, he was the son of a devout Catholic family. He served in World War I, earning the Iron Cross, then returned home to teach physical education and run youth camps. He believed in discipline, faith, and decency, the virtues of an older Germany. When the Nazis rose to power, Hosenfeld joined the party, like many others who hoped it would restore the nation's pride. But by 1940, stationed in occupied Warsaw, he saw what that pride had become. His job as cultural officer was to organize sports and morale events for German troops, but the streets outside told another story. He saw Jewish families herded like cattle, corpses on sidewalks, children starving in alleys. He wrote in his diary, "Every day I see things that make me ashamed to be German." Gradually, Hosenfeld began to resist, quietly, secretly. He helped Poles get false identity papers, arranged jobs to spare them from forced labor, and even sheltered a Jewish man named Leon Worm who had escaped a train to Treblinka. In his notes, Hosenfeld called the Nazi system a sickness of the soul. By late 1944, he knew the war was lost. The Soviets were closing in, and German officers were burning documents, preparing to retreat. When he discovered Szpilman in that abandoned villa, he had every reason to arrest or kill him. Instead, he asked him to play. The music broke something inside him, or perhaps it healed it. After Szpilman played, Hosenfeld brought him bread and jam, then a blanket, then his own coat. Each visit, he risked his life. They never spoke of politics or war, only survival. "Hold on," he told Szpilman once. "The war will end soon. You must live." When the time came to leave, Hosenfeld visited a final time. He left extra bread, a wool blanket, and whispered, "Remember me. If you ever need help, tell them my name." He didn't know that his name would one day be remembered by millions. In January 1945, Soviet forces finally entered Warsaw. The city was a ghost, miles of rubble, smoldering ruins, and silence. Out of that silence emerged one man, Władysław Szpilman. Starved, feverish, but alive. When he returned to Polish radio, the same studio he had played in 6 years earlier, he sat at a new piano and played Chopin's Nocturne in C minor, finishing the performance that German bombs had cut short. Szpilman published his memoir in 1946, titled The Death of a City. It told of his survival and the German officer who had saved him. But Soviet censors erased the officer's nationality. They couldn't allow a good German to exist. The book disappeared from print for decades. Meanwhile, in the Soviet Union, Captain Wilm Hosenfeld was not free. Captured in January 1945, he was accused of war crimes for having interrogated prisoners during the Warsaw Uprising, an automatic death sentence under Stalin's system. In prison, he wrote letters begging for help, listing names of Poles and Jews he had saved. "Find Szpilman," he wrote. "He will tell you who I am." Szpilman tried. So did Leon Worm, but their pleas were ignored. Hosenfeld suffered a stroke in 1947 that left him half paralyzed. He died 5 years later in a Soviet prison hospital, aged 57, forgotten by the world he had defied. Decades later, Szpilman's son republished his father's story in 1998 under the title The Pianist, including Hosenfeld's diary excerpts. The book inspired Roman Polanski's 2002 film, which won 3 Academy Awards and immortalized both men's bond. In 2009, Yad Vashem recognized Wilhelm Hosenfeld as righteous among the nations, honoring him for saving Jews during the Holocaust. His children accepted the medal in Berlin. Szpilman lived until 2000, performing until the end. He never stopped telling Hosenfeld's story, the story of a German who chose humanity over hate. In the ruins of Warsaw, amid a world of cruelty, a pianist played for his life, and one soldier listened. That single act of mercy echoed through time long after both their songs had ended.